Well, hello and welcome to the Tippy College's webinar on Side Hustle How-To. My name is Barb Thomas and it's my pleasure to coordinate today's event. Now, this event is the first in a four-part series focused on entrepreneurship. In future webinars, we'll be covering topics such as starting your business, financing your business, and finally, expanding and growing your business. Those webinars will take place in November, January, and in April. And we will put a registration link in the chat for the November webinar. But first, on October 23rd, we will highlight the presidential prediction markets, including the Tippy College's own Iowa electronic markets. We'll hear from Tom Gruca, who is the director of the IEM and a professor of marketing. The registration link for that will be in the chat as well. Now, our alumni calendar is full with two celebrations of the 25th anniversary of the Hawkinson Institute. We'll celebrate on October 18th in New York City and in Chicago in late January. And remember, homecoming is just over a month away. We will host our annual barbecue on the patio on Friday, October 25th, prior to the parade. In addition, we have a block of tickets for the Northwestern game available through our alumni website. Look in the chat and you'll find out more. Now, today's program will be recorded and will be made available on the Tippy College's alumni resources page and on our YouTube page. All of our webinars are free and open to the public, so feel free to share registration information with your friends and associates. Now, while today's webinar is focused on side hustles, the Tippy College actually has faculty and PhD students who are researching the effects of side hustles, the gig economy, and multiple jobs. So if you would be willing to participate in a research study, please scan the QR code on your screen and watch the chat for additional information. One of the professors will actually be chatting there and sharing some of that information. Now, today, our webinar will be moderated by Lynn Allendorf, Director of the John Pappajohn Entrepreneurial Center here at Iowa. Lynn has a BS in economics and an MBA from the University of Iowa. Our panelists include Scott Swenson, a Tippy marketing grad who is now an adjunct instructor with the Tippy College in the area of entrepreneurship. Scott's background includes working in a small business development center. In addition, we are joined by two other Iowa alums, Mathias Gran, who has both an undergraduate degree and an MBA from Iowa, and Katelyn Anderson, who has an undergraduate degree and an entrepreneurship certificate from the University of Iowa. Now, we will have time for questions at the end of the webinar, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and feel free to use the chat to communicate with us. Now, if you do want to share information with others on there, just make sure in the chat that you choose that you are communicating to everyone. And so with that, I will turn our webinar over to Lynn Allendorf. Lynn?
Welcome. Thank you, Barb. And thank you for all of you joining us today. I also want to thank the panel for volunteering their time and expertise. The John Pappajohn Entrepreneurial Center has obviously a large academic program serving the entire University of Iowa campus, but we also have a major outreach initiative to help startups and small businesses. Our assistance is for current students, of course, but we also help U of I faculty and staff, local community members, frankly, anyone living within the state of Iowa, and all of our alumni. So we would be happy to help any of you with your side hustles or any startup that you're working on. Please reach out to me if there's anything I or the center can do for you. Now, while running the Entrepreneurial Center is my day job, my side hustle is selling on eBay. I have had as many as 10,000 active listings at any one time, so I do understand what a side hustle is and how prevalent they are to our economy. Nearly 2 in 5 adults currently have a side hustle in the United States. A third of baby boomers have a side hustle. more than 50% of Gen Z and millennials earn extra income in some way, shape, or form on the side. Now, we are planning to reserve the last 15 minutes today for Q&A. We've already received quite a few questions, and we've tried to address most of them in our discussion. One subject I want to address just very briefly before we jump in is passive income. I realize this is a major topic on social media right now. Today, we're going to talk about side hustles. And I can assure you that all of the side hustles we're going to be covering today have nothing to do with passive income. They are a lot of work. Passive income is typically considered something as boring as investing in an S&P 500 fund, but there are some other ways to do that. But typically, something like investing in real estate wouldn't be one of them because renters are a lot of work. So feel free to contact me with more questions about that as well. Now let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to start by having the panel all introduce themselves briefly, talking about both their day job and if they have a side hustle, what that is. So let's start with Mathias.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real joy to be here. As in a way, this is fulfilling part of a dream that started 20 years ago as an undergrad when Lynn was painfully advising me when I was just a formative mind. So I was an early participant in the Bedell Entrepreneurial Learning Lab on campus, and Lynn was my advisor at that time. So I always dreamed of being able to give back to the university in this fashion. And it took 20 years for me to get back in this way, but I'm very happy to be here and honored to be a part of the panel. So my full-time gig, I'm executive director at a product development firm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with a 90-year history of producing some of the most iconic designs in American history, from the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile to the Scotch plaid on tape, as well as over 3,000 mid-century products, and including the Miller High Life product launch and the logo that's still in use today and is hung very high in the skyline in Milwaukee. So Brooks Stevens, we believe design matters, and we make products that connect to experiences through thoughtful design. And we want to help anyone who's trying to bring new products to market, new to world. That's our specialty. And in a way, it's practicing entrepreneurship every day, which is a real gift for me. I have multiple side hustles. I'm a walking side hustle, so to speak. I'm an adjunct faculty member at the University of Denver. I teach in their online MBA program in the executive leadership area. And I've also created a digital product that helps connect parents to their children through trust building and positive affirmations, as well as a variety of other projects. So I have been an entrepreneur since I was an undergrad and continue to be an entrepreneur. And so I'm very, very happy to be here and talk about all the joy and strain of that process.
Well, thank you, Mathias. Katelyn, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katelyn Anderson. I'm a proud 2017 Iowa graduate, and my current role is in the anesthesia department at the University of Iowa Hospitals. I work in their simulation center as an instructional services coordinator, helping to run the simulations for the residents and medical students. And then my side hustle is a transport device for IV poles to help nurses and clinical staff.
Thank you, Katelyn.
Yep.
Scott, welcome today.
Well, thank you. My full-time, I should say, my part-time job is as an entrepreneur in residence with the Pappajohn Entrepreneurial Center. I'm the lead instructor for the Venture School program. We've got cohorts kicking off across the state beginning next week. There, we're helping people take their business idea, map it into a business model, and then prove it out and validate this thing before they start executing on it. I also work with teams internal to the university that are trying to commercialize on their technology and research innovations. And my very first experience as a side hustle was an unintentional side hustle where a partner and I started a retail store. The idea would be that I would join it full time once we got the first couple of months of revenue kicking in, but we never got enough revenue for that to happen. So it remained a side hustle for 10 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Okay, let's go to the entrepreneurs on the panel. Let's start with Katelyn this time. So talk about why you decided to start a side hustle, what motivated you? Was it like a dream or a passion? And then maybe also touch on the status of it.
Yeah, so again, I graduated in 2017, and at the time when I was in college here, I worked in the radiology department at Iowa, and I was in Bob Walker's like introduction to entrepreneurship class, and he had us go through our week looking for problems that bothered us, and then the following week he said, okay, now try to think of solutions. And I knew immediately that every time at work, I was so annoyed with transporting IV poles. You have to take the equipment off the IV pole and put it onto the wheelchair. And so I said we could solve this problem with a device for this, and kind of drew it down on a piece of paper and went from there. It was a class project initially, and then my professors encouraged me to enroll in some of Iowa's pitch competitions for students, and I went that route, and then kind of slowly kept it going after college.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Mathias?
Yeah, so I think so just a little framing. I'm joining you live from the University of Colorado at Denver campus. It's Denver Startup Week, and so I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs and aspirations and dreams. And I think a really common thread that we see across entrepreneurship that also aligns with me is, in a way, we're sort of born this way. We're sort of odd people in the fact that we're willing to take on seemingly absurd challenges because we are drawn to that. And there's a bit of fulfillment and identity that's associated with the mindset of an entrepreneur. And so for me, in any of the efforts that I took on, I have a deep drive to see it work. I want to see an idea come to life. I remember in David Hensley's first class, he said entrepreneurs are addicted to opportunity, and that seems like an obvious truth to me. So I feel that way as well. And overall, I feel a strong need to contribute something to the world, to improve people's lives, to have an expression and a point of view that I contribute and can be my own. And so I think when I got into any of my businesses, I really needed to ask myself, and I encourage you to ask yourself, what do you want to see happen at the end of this? And there's a lot of narrative out there around what I call the founder's fantasy, which is you have a great idea, you take it to market, and then you retire because it's such a good idea that it'll just fly off the shelves. And it's really not that way. The ultimate point of a business is to add value to someone's life in exchange for money. And so I need you to think about why you want to start your side hustle. Is it for fulfillment? Is it just something that you do that you deeply enjoy and you want to earn a little scratch for it? Is it just making $500 a month to supplement a car payment or a mortgage payment? Because as Lynn led with, all side hustles are work, and that's why the word hustle is in the title. No matter what you do, you have to find people that would buy from you, and you have to add value to them. So I got into it because I want to see my idea come to life. I want to add value to people's lives. I want to contribute to the world in a greater way than my 9 to 5. And I encourage you to look at that question for your own hustle.
Thank you, Mathias. And I think that's a really good point. We're providing a lot of resources after the webinar that Barb will explain how you can access. But a lot of those resources really address taking an idea and somehow vetting it and making sure that people are going to want to buy your product or service before you invest money and time and resources. So really take a look at some of those if some of you are at the really early ideation stage. Okay, for both of you again, Katelyn, did you have to keep your side hustle quiet at any point when you first started it, or was there anything awkward with your employer or anything like that?
My boss in radiology was actually really helpful. She, for like the pitch competitions that I was in, she helped me get all the equipment that I needed from the radiology department, which was basically IV poles and wheelchairs. And from there, before I started this job at the university, I filed a provisional patent to kind of lock in my idea. And then I have a year from the time that was filed in June to then actually file an official application with the patent office.
Great. So that really enabled you to say, hey, I developed this on my own before I worked for you. This is my intellectual property.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Matthias.
Yeah, I would just add to that by saying most employers in larger organizations have documentation through HR about intellectual property or other businesses. Particularly, they want to be looking for, does this compete with our service offerings? So you want to make sure that you notify your employer of any outside business activities, but also that protects you as well for your current role as well as your future job. So I have been employed when I have started LLCs and other digital products and disclose those to my employer. And it's usually an approval because you shouldn't compete with your employer. But having that on record as a time when you came up with the idea and you initiated that is useful for not only your current role, but then your future roles as well. So make sure to keep everything above board. Great,
thank you. Okay, let's get into some of the tactical issues now and jump over to Scott. So what are some what's some basic advice you give to people that you meet with that are, about to start a side hustle or maybe have recently started a side hustle? What types of things do you tell them they need to do?
Right. I always advise them that the most important part of this whole thing is they need to know how to create customers and keep them happy. That's really the mission that they're trying to figure out. There's a whole bunch of process stuff that comes up, and I kind of call that the black cloud. It's questions about what kind of legal entity they need to have and registrations and permits and all that stuff. That all comes at a time. But it's usually after you've proven this out in some way. Those things are easy to figure out along the way too. There's plenty of resources to help with those things. I certainly did plenty of it when I was at the Small Business Development Center, and those centers are located across the country. But I think there's really three kinds of motivations that bring people into a side hustle. Sometimes it happens by accident. I call this the penny blossom thing. If you ever saw that Big Bang Theory episode where you start making something or producing a service and people ask for it and are willing to pay you. And those end up being something that kind of maybe you didn't intend to, but it turned into something. The other is maybe in the course of the work you're currently doing, you think you have an opportunity to break off and create your own entity, and you need some time to ramp up and to build it up. So you started as part-time activity in addition to your regular work. And then the third type of motivation usually has to do with, I got to figure this out before I start investing both my time and effort into it. Those are the venture school type of programs. And usually you start testing it and proving it out before you actually make that leap.
Great. So, like one thing when I first meet somebody that's working on starting a business and they're overwhelmed with the customer acquisition process and all of that, and so there's so many things to do when you start a business. One thing I've typically told them is open a separate checking account, to really separate the money, because at the end of the year, if they've actually run all their side hustle through that other checking account, they can at least take that to an accountant and help them figure out their taxes in the end, right?
Right.
We also get questions about, like, do I need to be an LLC? What's, that kind of thing. What's your advice there?
So in the beginning, we're all sole proprietors by default, meaning that we in the business are one and the same. If we were going to hang our shingle out and say we're in business, we can do that at any time. We don't have to register for anything. We're just creating an additional activity that's attached to our personal assets and our personal accounts. It's gotten very easy anymore to form an LLC And so probably the vast majority of side hustles are starting as LLCs because of that separation of assets. It starts to provide some legitimacy to the entity, so there's some marketing reasons to do so as well. And they're very flexible. Those type of entities can host multiple activities under that umbrella. So maybe you have more than one side hustle. You can create one LLC and host them all under that as one example. I saw a question in here too. It would be rare for a side hustle to form as a C Corp. It could, but usually a C Corp is for a much more scalable type of opportunity, might involve outside investors. Those are the typical things where you'd go through the expense and the complexity of forming a C Corp. Most of the time, sole proprietor, partnership, LLC, even an S Corp are typically the type of things you would see with a side hustle. The other kind of basic building block is to get an employer identification number or an EIN number, and that would replace your Social Security then as your business ID. And really, now you can go out there and open a separate bank account, and you're off and running. The rest of it is related to the operations of the business.
Great, thank you. And we've also got some questions about tax, and you'd mentioned sole proprietorship. That's a very easy tax issue. You file an additional thing called a Schedule C. It's a 2-page form. It's very self-explanatory, and that's how you would pay your taxes from your side hustle and deduct your expenses. And keep in mind that any side hustle income is taxable, and kind of a general rule of thumb might be to put 25% of it aside to have available to pay your taxes at the end of the year. Just kind of, it's not going to be absolutely 25%, but that should get you pretty close. So, depending, of course, on your tax bracket, that you're not going to be in a world of hurt trying to come up with the taxes at the end of the year. Okay.
Can I add one thing
yes,
to this
of course.
topic?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to give a little room for those that feel overwhelmed by the terminology at this stage in your business. I just want to reassure you that even though Lynn alluded to having there be many steps at the start of the business, they're all very achievable steps. And so even though these words sound very official and daunting, like legal entity and taxes and all this stuff, they're just steps that you can take, and people understand how to take those steps with and for you. So I just encourage you, if you're feeling overwhelmed or intimidated, to just learn. They're just definitions and terms, and there are resources here through the JPEC to help you understand how they relate. Because once you go through it and understand them, they're pretty straightforward, but they sound very scary for the first time.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, the strategic issues are going to be your tough battles. There are people and resources all over the state, all over the country that are there to help you with these tactical issues. So don't let them intimidate you, for sure. Okay, well, let's get back and dig in a little more to some details about side hustles. So, Katelyn, as your side hustle has grown, how do you balance the growth of your side hustle compared to your full-time work? Investing time into your side hustle and keeping your career going.
Yep, so mine pretty much has to be done evenings and weekends. I work an 8 to 5 job, so outside of those times. And right now, like where I sit, we're in kind of like the prototyping phase. So just scheduling those meetings outside of work hours. That has been a little bit interesting, but I have students at Iowa that are working on the prototype, so they are pretty flexible, which has helped a lot. And then from there, like a lot of time put in on the weekends too.
Fabulous. Thank you, Katelyn. Mathias.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I'm in a very flexible professional realm where Since we offer design services through Brooks Stevens, we will have peaks and valleys in that demand. And so I will find the time to contribute that works best for the business and for my life. I also have children, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so I'm driving kids to school while I'm on a video call, and I'll pick them up in the afternoon, and then I'll need to do some work in the evening. And so it's not glamorous at all in the sense that my workday is really like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that wears on me. But it's important enough to me to participate in that way that I can structure my work when I'm at my best. So in the evening, I might be able to do mindless work like emails and sketching and that sort of thing. But I try to prioritize my primary brain power for my client work and the stuff that I have to accomplish during business hours.
Great, thank you. So let's jump back to Scott for a moment. So when does someone know that their side hustle is like big enough that they can kind of abandon their full-time job?
That's a great question. I would describe it as a matter of pain. It's like they start feeling the pressure of time. And at some point, I tell people, you're going to have that decision to make, and you're going to have to fire yourself from something. But there's been a buildup leading to that. They've probably seen their revenues become substantial, their bank accounts starting to grow. They may not be 100% of the way to replacing their income, but they're getting close. And in fact, there's a threshold that you cross. Once you make that decision to do it, I tend to see motivations amp up like 10x. The performance amps up about 10x. It's just like the motivation is totally different when it's become your thing. So there's usually that boost that makes it worthwhile once you've had those leading indicators.
So let's look at the other side of side hustles a moment, Scott. So have you also advised people who had to make the tough decision to kind of give up on their side hustle?
Yeah, it kind of follows the same rules there. It's not usually as much a case of they're losing money or really negative consequences. It's more that it wasn't worth the time that they're putting into it. It's not providing the type of return that makes it worthwhile. And so they kind of just lose energy for it more than anything would be the primary motivator. It's also helpful to try and keep an objective eye. You don't want to keep your fingers crossed all the time, hoping customers are going to come. There have to be some benchmarks and some measurements and some outside opinions helping you to decide whether you're starting to gain any traction.
Great. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mathias, given your experience, how does a would-be entrepreneur know that they have something, or have a good idea?
Oh, this is so hard because I think good entrepreneurs have so many ideas all the time that it's really challenging to filter down the ones that actually have merits. And I have pursued many opportunities that are just not good ideas, but I felt compelled to pursue. So the way you have a good idea, and I was so bad at this for years, was just going to talk to people, your prospective customers. Ideally, your solution is addressing not only a pain in their life, but one of their top 3 pains. And I think that's the hardest discernment as an entrepreneur because we're so in love with our idea and we're so in love with our solution that it's very easy for us to selectively listen to like, oh, this will work, this will work, this will work. But in reality, when we do product discovery at Brooks Stevens and we do customer interviews, we aren't leading them at all. We're waiting for them to say what the pain is that we're fishing for. And we need to have a large percentage of our interview base describe almost exactly that same pain. That gives us the fuel to say, ooh, there's something here. If we came up with a solution, that would be really helpful. And usually, additionally, you want that pain to be really visceral. You don't want it, so you can have a product that's just neat and clever for sure, but selling that neat and cleverness gets challenging over time. So ideally, when you're talking to people and you're not pitching, by the way, you're discovering, you're learning, you're not selling, you're just trying to understand their experience. Hopefully you hear from people, oh, this is so hard for me. I wish there was a way to approach this problem. I really love this activity, but this piece is really hard. Those are the clues that tell you that people are willing to give money for that sort of solution. And that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, that really kind of gets back to something we teach our students about entrepreneurial research. We talk about the truly successful entrepreneurs being obsessed with the opportunity rather than being tied to one specific idea. And what we mean by that is they're obsessed with solving the customer's problems rather than obsessed with or being in love with one specific product that they want to sell to people.
Exactly. And to just put to really boost this point of view, at Brooks Stevens, I was very relieved and impressed that when we do product discovery, even just with sketches on a whiteboard, we'll come up with 40 or 50 solutions to the pain point early on in the discovery process.
Wow.
Not just 2 or 3, definitely not 1. And that's where I think a lot of us make the mistake is I've got this one great idea and the whole light bulb invention is a total myth. Great design and great products and great solutions don't come out of a dream usually. It's usually through a lot of thoughtful processing around someone's lived pain.
Yeah, the light bulb is a great metaphor. I like to think of the shower. People come or take showers and they come up with these great ideas, and then very few people get out of the shower, dry off, and actually do anything about it. So the entrepreneurs are the people that actually act on their ideas and opportunities.
Yeah, and have to be willing to be wrong. And I think that's the most important hurdle when you have that idea is when you go into this discovery, like there's a good chance that I'm the only one with this problem.
Right, right.
I
Yes,
built this
exactly.
for me. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make it for yourself. Okay, Katelyn, why don't you share with us the steps you took when you first considered your side hustle? Did you do any preparation or, what did you think were your first steps?
Yeah, so when I was in school, did like a few pitch competitions, but it really remained like a class project. And then I graduated and started working full time and kind of put it off to the side. And then this past year, really got more involved with it. I went through venture school with Scott, which I could go on and on about. But that just really took it off. And the customer discovery was huge for me. I would encourage anyone, if you have an idea, you have to put it through customer discovery. That really took it from just a class project to an actual side hustle for me.
Fabulous. Thank you. And let's go back to Scott for a moment. Obviously, there's an element of risk being an entrepreneur, and giving up your day job would be a huge risk, of course. But how are side hustles less risky than going all in at the beginning?
Right. A lot of people have the assumption that entrepreneurs are risk takers. In fact, entrepreneurs are risk mitigators. We're problem solvers. And we may see 1,000 problems in our concept that we're trying to work through on a constant basis. That's what we're doing with our side hustle is we're reducing the risk before we invest in this thing heavily. As Katelyn mentioned, sometimes there's an unproven aspect of your concept where it's good to go through a program of some sort where you can work on a business model or you can develop the technology. But you want to get to a point where you know that there's a market need before you step out on it full time. So that's one of the things that tends to happen. The other thing I would tell people is it takes a while to create a runway for yourself. That may be income or having savings or money that you can invest in the thing. So those are things to consider to make a side hustle a viable way to get going. And at times too, there's just the idea of, is entrepreneurship right for me? And a side hustle is a great way to test yourself and to figure out whether this is something that you're ready to jump out on.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And you touched on money to invest in your startup. We had some questions about that. So what you're referring to is bootstrapping, saving up a little money from your day job and investing it into your side hustle. What would the next step be? Like a bank loan? Would that be something that people could go out and get?
Well, it could be for the right situations. Bootstrapping is always a good option, unless you're pioneering a new innovation of some sort, where the time to get to market and to raise the capital to grow that thing may not be feasible.
Mhm.
In those cases, then you're usually looking for outside investors. So again, a side hustle is a great way to prove your concept before you take that next step of actually going out there and asking for money, whether it be through investors or through debt capital.
Yeah, that's great. And we have provided some resources on, how to pitch to investors and things like that for the side hustles that are really starting to go into that growth phase, for example. I think one other thing I'd like to mention on, getting a bank loan, keep in mind that if you go out and get a bank loan for your side hustle, you're still personally liable for that. So it's not like the business is signing for the bank loan. It's still the individual entrepreneur that's guaranteeing that bank loan. So it's really, a personal loan that you would be taking out. So it's always, bootstrapping and getting cash from operations as you start to sell products and services is really the best way to, get started at the beginning. Okay. Let's move on a little bit and talk about let's start with Mathias, like one or two challenges, or dare I say negatives, with having a side hustle.
As an adjunct leadership faculty member, I have to talk about feelings, emotions, and perspectives and beliefs. And so I think the biggest challenge that I experienced and I see around me in the community is understanding the fear that you carry. Like it is a vulnerable, risky thing to do, to put yourself out there, even just in a conference room. Even just sharing an idea is an uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people in a casual setting. And so to imagine doing that in a public way, I think is a leap that is uncomfortable for a lot of people. So for me included, I spent, when I was between roles, I had 18 months to spin up a couple of my businesses. And I did some of the things I thought I should do. I created some content, I did some web work, I worked with the design team. I took some steps, but those weren't really the hard, important steps of going, meeting with customers, understanding their pain, shaping the narrative to fit what their needs were. So I regret that. And I've made that mistake multiple times as an entrepreneur. So I would say one of the biggest important things that's hard to do is to confront those narratives that you're carrying right now about both why you want to be an entrepreneur and what supports you need when it gets hard. And for me, I need somebody to literally sit with me and type, like sit next to me when I type that cold outreach, help me hit my metrics so I can make the phone ring. And that's what I need. And I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to that. So it's hard from timing, but I think the biggest hurdle for folks like me is just managing that uncertainty, managing that vulnerability.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Katelyn.
Yeah, for me, I think it was like after I graduated, I was working full time. So I was like, okay, I had this thing that was a class project. How do I move it from that phase to like something that's an actual physical product? How do we get from point A to point B? So I reached out to a few of my former professors, and they both recommended going through venture school. So that was a big turning point for me, was going through that structure every week and having the time to focus on it. So I think another challenge is obviously like creating the time for it. You've got to to get it to move the needle. You've got to set aside time and structure that out.
Thank you. Scott, are there any negatives, challenges you want to touch on?
I see a question here about what bootstrapping is. I thought I'd just touch on that for a second too.
Sure.
Bootstrapping is using the revenues that this side hustle is producing to fund the business. So it's usually revenues or things within your own personal assets. It could be your savings account or family and friends, things like that. It's when you bring in outside capital that would be not bootstrapping. Yeah. So some of the risks are obviously, besides the side hustle, you've got a day job, you've got family, you've got a lot of things that are going on, and life happens going on through all of that. And sometimes it takes your attention away from your business. Sometimes it's not in your best interest to have your foot on the gas at all times. So you just have to have some flexibility here and know that it's okay that it's not your full-time thing yet. There's a reason it's not.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Well, let's get into our lightning round. I'm going to give you each 1 minute to give one final bit of advice for people exploring the idea of a side hustle before we get into the Q&A. Katelyn.
Yeah, I would recommend knowing if it's a mosquito bite or a shark bite. Like what's the size of the problem that you're solving? Because if it's a mosquito bite, people just ignore those. But if it's a shark bite, they're going to seek attention immediately. So you want a device or you want a product or service that they'll buy. So you have to do that initial assessment. What kind of bite am I solving here?
So people are only going to pay you to solve their big sharp bite problems. Is that what you're saying? Great.
Yes.
Okay. Fabulous. Matthias.
Oh, this is such a hard question. I'm gonna lean on to think about the size of organization that you're trying to build. And you might not even think of it as an organization when you're starting out. You're just a person, right? And so I bulleted out a few different examples of side hustles that I think people might be interested in. And one, I have a friend whose partner makes woodcraft and sells it on Etsy. And it's a really small business because they only need to make one to take a picture of it and make it for sale, and then they can produce just in time. And so they have very little overhead and very little risk in any of the things they try to do. And that business is entirely run on Etsy. So they leverage the infrastructure that already exists. So it's a very achievable business to start for someone. Another one might be a consulting or coaching business where literally you just need a business card and an LLC and a bank account, and you can start generating revenue. Whereas if you're trying to develop a SaaS platform like one of my digital products, there's a lot, and it's getting harder every day to make a digital product due to risk and regulatory. So I just want you to think about the idea you have. Is it, I can have just-in-time inventory, and I can leverage the infrastructure that already exists, whether it be Amazon or Etsy, versus I need to invent the ecosystem for my business to survive in. That's a lot more work. And so as you go into it, I just encourage you to think about how much of me can I give to this? Because at first, your business is you, your brand is you, the success is you. And I just want you to be thoughtful about how big a bite you're taking as you go in.
Great. Thank you. Scott.
One of the things about an entrepreneur in my experience is they tend to see things in a finished state. So whatever this business idea is, they see it when it's mature, something that might be 2 years down the road. And with that vision in mind, it becomes really overwhelming about how do I get there. So I always counsel people that the most important part is getting started. There's a path or a trajectory to get to that finished state. And stepping out on that idea, I think, is probably the most critical part. It doesn't mean jumping in full force from the very beginning, but you do something with the idea. You start talking about it, you start putting some framework to it, you start testing it, and you just get going.
Awesome. Yeah, I've read that, you sell, or build, and then you take a mini break, and then you maybe organize your business, get your taxes in order, or something like that. And then you jump in again, create another mess, and then you calm down briefly to clean it up a little bit, is how entrepreneurs tend to operate. Well, great. Thank you to all the panelists for that really engaging discussion. And now Barb is going to run our Q&A. She's been monitoring the chat, so she can start throwing questions our way.
Great. Well, first off, there is a question about when your idea is quite small. For example, making cakes on the side, or as Mathias mentioned, having an Etsy site. If she's only making $5,000 on the side, should this person still get an LLC or an EIN?
Well, let me take that one. I won't be able to take most of them, so I'll grab this one. No, she would not need an LLC. Absolutely not, unless she thinks she's somehow putting her personal assets at grave risk baking cakes for people, which is unlikely. But the EIN, you might need to get an EIN to open a separate bank account. Sometimes banks won't let you open a business checking account with your social security number. Some will, some won't. So, but an EIN, you can get one from the IRS in about 2 minutes. So very easy.
Great, thank you. Well, and I know as we were planning this webinar, it was certainly a fascinating discussion. And one of the things that Mathias, you said to us was about thinking about what you want to do in the business. Do you want to be very involved in the business? Do you want to run the business? Do you want to only eventually just be on the board? Can you just kind of touch base on the various roles or kind of some of that thinking that people should think about? Because as we said, it's not like I have a genius idea and everyone wants it instantly.
Yeah. Deciding if you want to start this side hustle for personal fulfillment, like I have a craft that I do, or a trade, and I want to just find a way to earn a living practicing my trade or craft. That's a very different motivation than someone who really loves to just watch the bank account go up and wants to design a system that other people can run. So my first business, I feel like it went under because my co-founder and I were owner operators, and the skills we were using, we thought we could hire in the marketplace. And it turns out the skill sets were just like, we tended to be kind of gifted at that craft. And so our business failed because we couldn't replace our gifts for the same hourly rate that we were billing our customers. And so just starting to think about, is this something that I can pay someone to do for me? Or is this something that I have to and want to do myself? How much of that do I want to take on? So an example, I met a guy at a burrito store who filled up the little coin op like vending machines, for the little trinkets. And he loved it. He's like, I can go around and just put M&Ms in these things once a weekend, once a month, and I have a nice little few $100s a month. I could also pay someone to do that, but I just really like it. I like meeting people. I like driving around town. And so I'm going to continue to do that. So I just think you should think about how you need to hire people to do the work in your business versus having you lead that business yourself.
Excellent. Thank you. So here's an interesting question. How much do you encourage the use of AI in ideation or allow it in developing the pitch itself?
I'll jump in on this one.
Okay.
I am using AI more and more and more when it comes to business model development. It's not going to innovate. That's not the way to use it, but it's really good for doing basic market research. If you need to have a sounding board kind of thing, if you're trying to summarize a lot of data and interpret it, it's really helpful in a lot of ways, but think of it as an assistant. It's probably not going to come up with that magic sauce that is going to be your differentiator, but it's a great way to accelerate the process.
Excellent. Now, we did have a question that asked about books, and this gives me the perfect opportunity to let everyone know that our panelists have developed a one-page sheet of resources that we are going to provide as a PDF after the fact. Now, as it is with all of our webinars, we send out a link, an email to everyone who registered. So if you can't attend, you can still watch the video. But with that email, we will include a link to the PDF so that you can see a list of book recommendations, a variety of helpful links on different organizations that can help you in the process, etc. So thanks to the panelists for that. And if you want some good books, watch for that email. Lynn, there is a question about selling internationally and how do you handle varied, like especially on say eBay, how do you handle varied shipping, customs, and taxes? Is that in your
Yes.
wheelhouse?
Yeah, sure. So a platform such as eBay or Etsy, they're going to do a great job of helping the seller do that. So they all have various different ways you can ship internationally. They walk you through the paperwork and what's required. They have links to, there's certain things you can't sell in certain countries. So they really provide adequate resources for that. So I would recommend people use the resources available through the platform. Now, if they're doing it on their own and trying to ship internationally, I would recommend the United States Postal Service's website. They have a lot of resources as well.
Excellent, thanks. So one of the things that has been mentioned today, especially Katelyn, you mentioned it, was the JPEC's Venture School. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to inform the audience. What is the Venture School? Who can participate in the Venture School? Lynn, do you want to take that?
Sure. Venture School is a program that uses the business model Canvas tool, and that you can learn more about in the resources that we sent out to really help you vet your idea, figure out who your customer is, develop your initial marketing plan, things like that. It's a 7-week class, one night a week. For the full evening. We offer it at about 5 locations around the state, as well as have online options as well. So we would welcome anyone from our alumni database to register for the online version, and they would participate with people here in Iowa taking it in person in kind of a hybrid environment. This semester we're offering it in Des Moines, Iowa City, and Mason City, as well as the online resource.
Awesome. Well, we have a couple of questions about loans and banking, and Mathias has raised his hand and said that he was willing to take those on. So Mathias, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So when you're just starting out, particularly if you formed an LLC or as a sole proprietor, you're going to be treated almost the same, which is if you just formed an LLC and show up at a bank, you have no history, you have no credit, you have nothing, no collateral. So you're not a very appealing candidate for the bank unless they pull in your personal assets and your credit history to help make the decision. So I obtained a business loan very early on using a car that we owned as collateral that we had paid off. And so that helped obtain a line of credit for us, which is, I think, a better way to go than getting a loan anyway, because then you only pay interest on what you use and you can have that rotating line. So I just want you to know going in, if you want to apply for a bank loan, you're going to have to probably put your own assets into that conversation and your own credit score. So if those things aren't in a good spot, remember banks are the most conservative lenders that you're going to run into. If you have other capital needs through either friends and family, angel networks, those are going to be people that are going to be able to take a larger risk on an early stage company. Otherwise, if your credit's great, you have some good assets that you can bring to the table, go for it. Banks love good deals. So make sure to make the deal good for them, and then you can get a loan probably.
And Lynn actually makes a good point where she says, keep in mind that business loans can take weeks, unlike, say, a car loan, which can take an hour. So these are not as quickly moving as other loans that you may experience.
Yeah,
the thing,
one quick story about that. I'm sorry,
yes.
One quick story. So one of my businesses, one of my LLCs, I asked for a company credit card so I could start building credit for that entity. And they said, we can give you up to $500 line of credit, and you have to personally guarantee it. And so it's just kind of hilarious because we can't really do anything with $500 a month. But that's what was offered to me from my institution. So it's a little harder when you're early on, but I think it's worth getting it started so you can build that history.
Let's see. So this question is specifically for Katelyn. It says, you mentioned having students help you with product creation. How are you doing that? Or rather, what's your product development been like?
Yeah, so I've been working with Proto Studios, which is the prototyping branch of the university. And you can have engineers work on your prototype that work for Proto Studios, or you can have students work on it at a reduced rate. So that was attractive for me. And they've done a great job. I meet with them every couple weeks and we go over kind of what they've designed, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, test it out, and kind of are narrowing down to a final prototype. So it's been a great resource.
Just one more example here of all of the amazing resources available from the University of Iowa's John Pappajohn Entrepreneurial Center. So please, we want to make sure that everyone remembers to watch for our email, watch for our list of resources, because it's going to give you a lot of the things that might help you, as well as you have these experts in front of you today. And I know that all of them are willing and happy to consult and talk with anybody who has got that idea that they'd like to get going. So this actually kind of brings our time to an end. I really want to thank all of our panelists and Lynn for the time that they have given us today. A reminder that there will be an email with a link to the video, a link to the resources as well, but that when we end our webinar today, there will be a short survey that will appear in your browser. We would appreciate you taking just a few moments to fill out a few quick questions. It gives us a good idea of how we're doing, but it also gives you the opportunity to give us ideas on future webinars. It was actually from a past webinar that we had a lot of questions about starting a business, which actually resulted in the entrepreneurial series that we're doing this year. So, as always, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank all of our panelists, and as always, go Hawks. All right.
Go
Thanks,
Hawks.
everyone.
Go Hawks.